back to Canada and all the way over to Nanaimo, British Columbia. That's where the federal Liberals are meeting after a challenging summer. The party's support continues to slide in national polls, and last week the NDP ended the agreement that propped up the minority government. Now, the Prime Minister has brought in a big name to help craft economic policy. The CBC's Raffy Boudjikanian is in Nanaimo at the caucus retreat. Okay, so Raffy, the Prime Minister has enlisted former Bank of Canada and Bank of England Governor Mark Carney as a new advisor. Carney spoke to reporters today at the retreat. What stood out to you about what Carney had to say?
David, it might be a bit of a cliche to say this, but a lot of journalists were more interested in what he didn't have to say. Now, you've heard the same rumor mill stuff I have over the last few months, that Mark Carney is perhaps interested in leading the Liberals at some point in the future, that he's being lured in as finance minister at a more closer point in time. Rumors he's continuously denied. This was the first time journalists got to speak to him directly, and a lot of us had questions about whether he's even considering running in the next federal election. Here is one example of how he chose to answer those.
I have a couple of simple rules. One, if the Prime Minister of Canada asks me to do something, I will do it. I will serve to the best of my ability. Secondly, I'm interested. I have some experience in these issues, and I'm interested in helping our country to grow. I'm interested in doing something, not being something. And this is a decisive time for our economy. These issues have to be tackled head-on, and as I said at the outset, I'm honored to be part of this process.
Raffy, I guess it raises the question of whether or not the Prime Minister asked him to run, because he says when the Prime Minister asks you to do something, you do something. But it's interesting. On the carbon tax, this is an issue that there is some daylight between Mark Carney and the Liberal government, because he's famously said at committee that the carbon tax has served a purpose up until now. What did he say about that today?
Yeah, he didn't address that today, though. To be fair, I don't think we asked him directly about what he might have to recommend regarding the carbon tax. It's also not the only difference he's had with the Liberals on this. A few months ago in October, when they announced that home heating oil carve-out, he said that he might have had different advice on how to help out financially strapped Canadians, in part because it's important to have clarity on climate policy. Now, yes, he did also tell a Senate committee in May that the carbon tax has served its purpose and that any potential replacement should be as effective as it is on dealing with climate emissions. We did ask the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, about what Cabinet might do if Carney ends up telling them, hey, you should get rid of the carbon tax. She didn't really address it. She said for now they just want to hear him out and listen to what he has to say, David.
Okay, Raffy, thank you very much. That's the CBC's Raffy Boudjikanian in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Today, the Liberals' key economic minister welcomed the new economic advisor to the team.
Mark is a personal friend of mine of very long standing. I have been talking to Mark about the economy since long before I became a politician.
I have some experience in these issues, and I'm interested in helping our country to grow. I'm interested in doing something, not being something.
Well, since the Carney announcement, the Conservatives have already lumped him into their attack videos. This is a screenshot from a video posted earlier this morning, and that is Mark Carney in between Justin Trudeau and BC's NDP Premier David Eby. Meanwhile, the federal NDP are building on their key message from last week, reminding voters they are a viable option.
It's always impossible until it isn't. It can't be done until someone does it. If we are together, nothing is impossible.
Okay, so that's a flavor of the message. How do these political strategies stack up? Let's bring in the power panel on that. Shachi Kurl is the president of the Angus Reid Institute. Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal National Campaign Director. Françoise Boivin is a former NDP MP. And here with me in the studio, Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst. All right, gang, a few things to talk about there, but I do want to talk about Mark Carney really sort of entering things in a more formal way rather than sort of being talked about. So Shachi, what is Is there a bump from this? Is there a bounce from this? What do we make of the fact that the former governor of 2 G7 central banks is advising the party rather than the government on policy development?
Well, I mean, he has said in the past that he's willing to advise, he wants to serve. So we're hearing a lot of the same messages from him. But really, this is about distraction, and if you are the Liberal Prime Minister, if you're a member of the Liberal caucus, this is a welcome distraction. We're all talking about Mark Carney. What we're not talking about are the dismal numbers in terms of vote intention that the Liberals are facing, and they've been on a 3-year, 14-point downward slide that is showing no sign of reversing. They're now in a dogfight for distant second place with the NDP. They don't have to talk about any of that. You know, Mark Carney being there today changes the conversation. And if he actually has some credible economic advice to give, which, as credible as he is, he probably does, then tant mieux, right? Like, more's the better. But this is one of those situations where he gets out there, the Prime Minister's not the one taking it on the chin at a time when he's already got MPs openly calling for his ouster and resignation. This is also an opportunity for Mark Carney to kind of kick the tires a little bit. Soft launch, if you will, even if it's not for this round before the next election, maybe for successorship. So all of those things probably working better for the Liberals in Nanaimo as opposed to anything else they might have been talking about without him.
But, you know, Michelle, he has all of this experience, right? He was head of the Bank of Canada during the economic crisis more than a decade ago, head of the Bank of England. Why not tap that to help with your fall economic statement and measures there, your budget in the spring, which is your last chance to sort of help shape things before you go to the election, rather than sort of hold them off and put them in a party-specific role rather than a government-specific role?
Well, can you not hear the cacophony that the Conservatives would have if he did take a government role and he was advising them? Let's be clear. You know, we're down a couple of goals and in the third period, and you don't leave an all-star player on the bench. You put him to use. And so they are. And just because he's working for the party, it means that no government taxpayer money is going there. It means that he can be involved in the campaign. He can be in advertising, and he can be out there doing partisan speeches. And at the same time, you can still give advice to the government, and you can give new ideas to a party putting together a platform or the budget that's coming up. There's no shortage of being able to do that. So, you know, as Mr. Chrétien put Mr. Martin in his ads in the 9th year of a mandate, and you know, put on every face that you possibly can, shake it up, and put as many call on your strengths. I'm glad he's actually stepping forward and being a Liberal.
But I just to pick on your Martin, not pick on, but probe at your Martin example. He was in the cabinet and he was on the ballot, and you know, he was in the House of Commons. Yeah. This is a different kind of thing, right? So like, if the need to respond economically with the policy thing is urgent, shouldn't it be happening now in the time you have as government rather than saving it for a campaign?
Well, he has his credentials. Mm-hmm. And so he's, you know, he carries those credentials, and he's always going to have them to be able to speak in whatever fashion he wants to. You know, this way, there's no conflict whatsoever with if he's being involved in the Liberal platform. So I think they're being extra cautious.
Right. So Kate, you heard Michelle say, can you imagine the cacophony from the Conservatives had he gone into government? You're going to get that anyway with the Conservatives. They're already on the attack. They've tried to nickname him Carbon Tax Carney for what that is worth. What do you make of this move and the response from the official opposition?
Yeah, well, call me cynical, but having him be a party employee as opposed to an employee of government also means that he continues to hold a number of roles that he already has. He can still take, you know, paychecks from the number of various things that he's involved with. So he doesn't have to give up those obligations in order to be a part of the government. I have to think that that's part of the calculation. I have to think part of the calculation is also, you know, wanting to be in touch with the party apparatus and the party brass, not necessarily having the guts to put his name on the ballot just yet. So he will be able to do that in a more organized way. But I think, you know, to Shachi's point about this being a distraction, I agree for the Liberal caucus, it certainly is. I don't think that it will be for Canadians, because when you have Minister Freeland stand up and say, he's a close friend. He's been advising me all these years that I've been in government. I think Canadians will interpret that as, oh, this is a lot of the more of the same. And that is not what they're looking for from the government right now. This is more about validation of the Prime Minister and the core team around him in bringing Carney in, as opposed to a challenge function, which is really what I think the government needs right now.
But how is Mark Carney taking a role with the party? Maybe to sustain his private interests rather than going with the government. How's that any different what Jenny Byrne is doing? Is essentially running the political apparatus of the Conservative Party, but like doing it through the party rather than coming to the opposition leader's office. It's the same sort of ethical professional firewall, is it not? Yeah,
I guess I wouldn't see the role of striking a working group and a task force on economic growth the same as providing political advisory services. And, you know, if you're Minister Freeland or even a member of the elected government, does it really make sense to have that function report directly to the Prime Minister as in his role as party leader, as opposed to through the Minister of Finance? That's one thing I found very strange about all of this. Why is the Economic Growth Task Force conceivably something that should report to the finance minister ahead of the Fez, going directly to the Prime Minister and circumventing elected officials in the process?
Françoise, it seems to be exclusively for platform development for the next year, right? So it sounds like they're tapping him to develop the platform. I don't think he's going to have any formal role on the fall economic statement or on the budget. At least that's my understanding from the news release and from talking to Karina Gould. What are your thoughts on Carney's on the team? He's declared himself as a Liberal several years ago. Now he's taken a more active role, but not running, not in government. What do you make of where he's landed?
Well, I think he's actually bringing the full force of his name and of all the stories. For most Canadians, Mark Carney doesn't ring too much of a bell. They don't know him inside out, but they know that this guy is serious, could have maybe replaced the Prime Minister, and so on and so forth. Plus, he's got an economic background. And remember, last year was all about a shuffle of cabinet. Let's do a major one. Didn't work. After that, it's like we have to be a bit more clearer on our messaging. The Conservatives are racking up the points on economic things that matters to Canadian. And here comes Mr. Mark Carney as a special advisor. Mark Carney, named by Stephen Harper at the time as governor of the Canadian La Banque du Canada. And so all this put together, it's again the Liberal trying with an instant to change the tune. Will it work until the next campaign that could come pretty fast? I don't know, but it tells me one thing about Mr. Carney. He's not shying away from the Liberal brand, and he's also not shying away from the Prime Minister. So for somebody who might vie to replace him one day, it's not the place I would want to be on the eve of the Titanic moment, you know?
But, you know, Shachi, look, I know there is a reflexive cynicism in politics and political analysis and political journalism. I'll include my profession in that.
Me?
No. But like, no, it's not aimed at you directly. I'm just laying some context out. But, you know, Mark Carney explaining today is like, when the Prime Minister asks me to do something, I do it. Now, I guess the Prime Minister didn't say, will you run? Because he's not. But he framed it as public service. And, you know, there's a criticism and a critique and a snarky nickname, and he's being attacked in ads for stepping up to offer his expertise for the good of the country. I mean, can it be as simple as that?
I mean, first of all, of course, what else is he going to say? I'm here because of political ambition, and I'm going to push my friend off a cliff. I mean, of course he's saying it's public service. What else is he going to say?
Well, he could say it's time to get off the sidelines and take a more direct role. I've, you know, moved closer, and now I want to have a more active role in getting my hands dirty in the world of things.
And that's a good point. But this allows him to sort of have his cake for now and eat it too, in that he can be one foot in and 1 foot out. He can still be a little bit coy, try and maybe in his own mind maintain some of that novelty factor. You know, I am not showing myself to be so arrogant that I see myself as an heir presumptive, but at the same time, hi, I'm here. I'm hanging out with you folks, and don't y'all like me? But this is, I mean, clearly the Conservatives are taking this very seriously, because we're already starting to see what I would call the pre-pooping process underway. And let's all go back to remember those
to use the formal
Harper-era
term
ads.
for it. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
with the seagull, and the dropping on the shoulders, and they tried it with Ignatieff, and they tried it with Dion. And the issue here is that unlike Justin Trudeau, who Pierre Poilievre could not define because he was already very well defined before Pierre Poilievre showed up, this is an opportunity and an attempt to pre-define and put that poop on Mark Carney now, and do that in such a way that any perceptions of Carney going forward are already starting to be baked and baked in not the best way possible.
And can I just add, it's been a proven model. Shashi points to Dion and Ignatieff, and it worked. Getting out ahead early of a potential political opponent worked, and it's something that the Trudeau Liberals failed to do with Poilievre. And now they're seeing the consequence of that. Poilievre had a lot of runway to define himself in his campaign. So why not make the direct connection between the years of service that Carney has provided informally to the government and now this formal role that he's taking on now? It's fair game.
Well, I mean, the outlier will be 2015, where they did the nice hair, though, ads on Justin Trudeau, and he went from third to first, but 2 out of 3 was very effective.
Well, and the only difference there is it was a change election, right?
Yes.
It was a 9-year government, much like this one.
But it's interesting they went after the third place guy, not the second place guy. But just on that, Michelle, if he's being brought in to help develop economic policy, don't you also want Mr. Carney to be the economic messenger for that policy in the next election campaign? I mean, do you think this is a precursor to talking him into running whenever it happens, or is it simply just to tap him for ideas and show the caucus, hey, we're reaching out to some different people to bring in some different perspectives?
Well, look, undoubtedly he would be welcome to run. And who knows, maybe he is going to run, not to fuel any kind of a gossip mill, but you never say never until all the candidates are on the ballot. But more importantly, after 9 years in government, the fact that they are reaching out to other people for ideas, and to a very credible person for economic ideas, to someone who might challenge their own ideas and challenge the status quo as it's been, hallelujah. Like, it's about time. I think that Liberals across the country are going to welcome it. No, they don't know who Mark Carney is. Most people don't. But wow, if there's a whiff of fresh air in that tired Liberal Party, that's what you need. And they need a little bit of energy. So, great if he can be a candidate, whatever. If he can bring in ideas, though, and set out a new path and maybe just challenge what they've been thinking, we're all the better for it. So I applaud them for it. I really do.
But, Francoise, he has been advising them on and off in the past, right? I remember for the COVID economic recovery, Mark Carney and Michael Sabia, who later became Deputy Minister of Finance, is now the top dog at Hydro-Quebec, came from the CAS in Quebec, the Prime Minister was reaching out to them and talking to them about an economic path forward. So he has played a role in sort of like the COVID response, which Mr. Poilievre criticizes, but a lot of global experts will say Canada did pretty well in the bounce back. So it's not completely new to tap Mark Carney for expertise here.
Exactly, and it goes to Michelle's point, and I wish it was the picture that you're giving, Michelle, because the fact that he's been already involved, the fact that I heard the Minister of Finance today repeat was something that we already knew, that she's been in contact with him for a long time. They know each other. Somebody was telling me that he's the godfather to one of her children. Yeah. So will he bring new ideas? The way he did his press conference, in a sense, as an observer, I was looking at him at his nonverbal. He seemed pretty at ease for a guy who's not a politician normally. With the journalists, the reporters that were there. But he already sounded a bit like a politician in my book, because he was asked some very direct question about if he'd run or things like that. And he could have very well said, I'm not there at this point in time. I mean, I liked his phrase. I like to do things instead of being things. That's all fine and dandy, but it tells me nothing, really. So I'm not so sure he'll come up with brand new ideas. I still think that the Liberals' big mistake throughout the decades is that they always expect a savior. There is no such thing, people. So it might happen in one election, like Justin Trudeau, but look at how God becomes almost nobody after a certain amount of time. So please don't do the same mistake with Mark Carney. And I think that's how they want to use him, his name. We all forgot about Mendez one day later. So anyway, we'll see in the long run. I hope I'm wrong and Michelle is right. I hope he comes with good ideas that could change things, and we'll see.
I'm not criticizing that phrase. I'm into doing things rather than being things. When you're the only human in history who's been the head of 2 central banks of G7 countries, you've been some things too. Like, that is an impressive resume that he brings to the table. Yes. And Kate, like, I know he has been advising the government in some capacity. Doesn't mean they necessarily took his advice, right? So we don't yet know, like, whether the input led to the output. But he is seen by a lot of people as perhaps more economically conservative than certainly the Trudeau government is viewed as. I know after St. Paul's, there were people in caucus saying we need to pivot, but we can't pivot on the social side because there's no more money left. You can't just keep running up the debt to pay for things. What does maybe this tell us about the direction they're going to go in? Does this look at a more business-focused, growth, productivity, economic, middle-of-the-road sort of traditional?
Yeah, I don't see that. And one of the reasons why is I would point to his very fierce and staunch stance around the carbon tax. He waned on it a little bit, but recall during the home heating fuel carve-out and exemption, very quickly Mark Carney came out to say, that's not the direction I would have gone if I were the government.
Right.
And I think if you were to ask a number of Canadians what that would mean in terms of the impact on affordability, no carbon tax versus the very lengthy explanation he tends to give about why it's a good thing, they'll resonate more with the immediate impact that removing the carbon tax would have on their day-to-day affordability challenges. So when it comes to, is he there to be a challenge function? I just have a hard time buying that because he's been around for so much key decision-making to this point. Again, I think this is about validating a credible external validator, but a validator, not somebody who's going to be, a wolf in a hen house coming up with new ideas. I think that he's there to ultimately have the back of Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland, who are under a lot of pressure from caucus about the decisions they've made, to say, yeah, no, trust me, these guys are on the right track.
He said a couple of things, though, Kate. Like on the home heating carve-out for home heating oil, he has said in a Senate committee that the carbon tax has served a purpose until now. Yeah. He sort of feels it's maybe time to find something different. And even on the auto investments, he suggested that maybe you'd be better off taking that money and paying for people to transition to heat pumps so they see a tangible benefit from the spending of this money. So he, while supportive of the Liberal Party and the Liberal government, there is daylight on his views of things and their actions, it seems.
Yeah, and that may well be, and the Liberals are a big tent party, so are Conservatives, and so I think there's opportunity for debate on that. I do think ultimately he could have illuminated today on what he sees as some of the things that the government is doing incorrectly, that there are things that they should be pursuing that they're not. He didn't take that opportunity today. And I think, broadly, for a government to bring on a strategic advisor like this, or the party to do that, it will be more about showing some credibility behind what they're already putting forward rather than starting anew. And I have to say, if you're an elected member of caucus who has been carrying water for the government for years now and, staring down the doom highway that is the next election, you're looking at this external advisor, I would think, with a bit of skepticism, because the answer is staring at you in front of your face about what you need to do. And it's listen to your caucus members and listen to Canadians, not somebody who's been out of the scene for years and years.
But, Shachi, I wonder, on the idea front and the direction of this government, or certainly for the offering for the next campaign, when Mr. Carney has disagreed with the policy positions of this government, a lot of people looked at it as leadership posturing and positioning. Is it perhaps a tug in a different direction for a government that has been pretty firmly set on a path for a couple of elections and a couple of budgets right now?
Well, I mean, if he's trying to tug particularly on carbon taxation, to Kate's point, listening to Canadians, we asked Canadians, 48% of Canadians supported at the time that home heating oil exemption, that carve out, and in turn asked, where's my exemption? Where's my break? And so, not necessarily in step, if you will, with where Mark Carney is at. And this is where the marketplace of ideas meets retail politics. And, Mark Carney may find that for his great credibility, for the vast experience that he's had on a number of issues, even for his skill as a communicator, he may well find himself in a situation where what he thinks is best policy is not necessarily something that he can sell politically, whether as an advisor to government or for his own purposes if he does have political ambitions either now or in the future. The other thing is that the Liberals have been a government and a party over successive terms that has had lots of ideas, many ideas, many announcements, many good things that will be done. Where it has always struggled is in delivering those things, right? We've heard so many announcements and so many lofty, grand programs that have taken so long to actually start to come into effect. I think, there was the school lunch thing, there's childcare, there's so many, take your pick. So for Mark Carney to say, well, I want to talk about innovation, or I want to talk about economic growth. Well, great ideas, but the road from talking about good ideas to actually delivering on good ideas in a timely manner, not something that has been this government's strength.
So Michelle, sorry, I'll let you jump in, but I just want to ask a question for you as well, because new ideas, new policy, great. But if the messenger is not being listened to, as even Liberal MPs are saying in Nanaimo, how do you make it work? That, your response to that and your response to Shachi.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge without question. Yeah. The Liberals aren't on air. And so, a lot of these attacks and that are going unresponded to. But if he comes up with new ideas, if he challenges the status quo, he's not there to stand up today in a press conference and kind of say where the government went wrong or not. He's an advisor to the Liberal leader. So he's going to be doing his work and fueling those ideas through a platform process, which hopefully, he will be a part of helping to sell as well come election time and as we near election time. So, it is about putting different voices out there as well, adding credibility behind it. He's got so much more depth on economic issues than certainly any of the party leaders. Let's be clear. I think it's a very fair question that others raised. Can you make that understanding and those ideas into something you can sell it on the retail level?
Okay, we're out of time. We got to say goodbye. But just to let you know, a week from today, when at least 3 of you are back, we're going to have 2 by-election results, and Parliament is going to be back. So that'll be fun.
Never will miss that.
All right. I want to thank the Power Panel: Shachi Kurl, Michelle Cadario, Francoise Boivin, and Kate Harrison. But don't